In the darkest of times, when all seems lost, there exists an unseen hand, guiding us forward, even when we cannot see it. The golden sun began its descent over the horizon, casting a warm amber glow across the small village at the valley's edge. The journey had been long, winding through narrow paths, dusty roads, and quiet villages where each encounter left its mark on the hearts of Jesus and his disciples. That day alone, they had walked through towns filled with the sick and suffering, spoken with the brokenhearted, and given hope to those who had almost given up. Now, as the evening approached, they felt a weariness not just in their bodies but in their souls. They found a secluded grove of ancient olive trees on the outskirts of a small village. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze whispered through the branches, casting flickering shadows over the weary travelers. The disciples, worn from the day's trials and exhausted by the constant stream of people who sought Jesus, each sat in a circle around him, their faces marked by a mix of reverence and unspoken questions. Despite their closeness to Jesus, they all felt, at times, alone in their struggles and doubts. Each disciple carried unique worries and silent burdens they had rarely shared, even with one another. Jesus, noticing the heaviness in their hearts, looked upon his friends with compassion and understanding. He knew they needed more than just answers. They needed a story that would reach into their souls, offering wisdom they could carry forward. His voice was calm yet filled with warmth as he began to speak, capturing each of their hearts as he often did. "There once was a farmer," Jesus began, his words floating over them like a gentle breeze. The disciples leaned in, recognizing the beginning of one of his treasured parables. They had heard him share countless parables with the people they met, each one containing a unique lesson. But tonight felt different. They sensed he was sharing this story not with strangers, but with them, his closest friends. In the stillness, they felt their fatigue melt away as they opened their hearts to his words. "This farmer lived in a small village," Jesus continued, "a place where life depended on the harvest he grew each season. Each spring he would take his seeds, go out to his field, and plant them with care, watering and tending to them daily. His hands were rough from labor, his face weathered by the sun and years of toil, yet his heart was soft with hope. Every season he trusted that his work would bear fruit, that his fields would yield a harvest." As Jesus spoke, the disciples could almost see the farmer in their minds. They pictured a man of quiet strength, with lines etched deep in his skin from a life of hard work. His field stretched out before him, and he moved through it with a slow, steady rhythm, each seed planted with purpose and hope. For some of the disciples, this image struck a familiar chord. They too had given up everything to follow Jesus, planting seeds of faith and truth in every town they visited. Their journey was one of faith, each step taken in hope of a harvest they could not yet see. One year, Jesus continued, his voice dropping slightly as though sharing a secret, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The skies turned ominous and the air grew heavy. Word spread quickly through the village that a great storm was coming, a storm unlike any the villagers had ever seen. The fear in the air was thick, and the villagers rushed to the farmer, urging him to take action. "You must protect your crops," they pleaded. "You have worked so hard. You cannot risk losing everything. Bring your crops inside, cover them, do whatever you can before it's too late." The disciples exchanged glances, feeling the tension in the story. Some of them had experienced similar warnings, times when they were advised to turn back, to leave this path of discipleship, to return to lives that were safer and simpler. But they had chosen to follow Jesus, driven by a yearning for something greater. They understood the urgency of the villagers, the pull to protect what was dear at all costs. Jesus continued, his voice softening, but the farmer looked out over his field with a calm expression. He saw the dark clouds gathering, felt the weight of the coming storm, yet his heart remained at peace. "The one who cares for us, who sees what we cannot see, will decide what my harvest shall be," he said. His neighbors were shocked, unable to understand how he could risk his entire crop. To them, he seemed careless, but the farmer trusted deeply in the unseen hand that had always guided him. Some of the disciples felt awe, admiring the farmer's courage and faith, but others wrestled with doubt. They admired his faith, yet wondered if they could have that same strength when faced with their own storms. Peter clenched his hands tightly, feeling his inner conflict. He wanted to trust fully, but fears and questions often found their way into his heart. The storm came, Jesus said, his voice low as if honoring the power of the elements. And it was fierce beyond measure. Winds howled through the village, tearing rooftops from homes, uprooting trees and scattering debris. Rain poured down relentlessly, flooding the fields, washing away the soil and destroying crops. The villagers could only watch as their hard work was reduced to nothing. Many farmers wept as they saw their livelihoods destroyed, the fruits of their labor gone in a single night. A heavy silence fell over the disciples as they felt the weight of the villagers' loss. They too had faced losses, family members who didn't understand their calling, friends who turned away, and the comforts of a life they had left behind. John, the disciple known for his tender heart, thought of his family, especially his mother. He had left her with promises to return, but he didn't know when or if that day would come. But when the storm passed, Jesus said, his voice lifting slightly, the villagers gathered to assess the damage. Their fields lay in ruin, crops flattened, and the land was scarred. But as they walked toward the farmer's field, they were struck by a sight they could not explain. His field stood untouched, as green and vibrant as the day he had planted it. Not a single stalk had fallen. The disciples' eyes widened, their breaths held as they absorbed the miracle of the story. They could almost see the lush, untouched field standing tall amidst the wreckage, a testament to something beyond human understanding. It was a beacon of faith in a sea of devastation. His neighbors, filled with amazement, ran to him and asked, "How were your crops spared when ours were destroyed?" Jesus' eyes gleamed with a light that seemed to transcend the present moment. "Because I trusted in the unseen hand," the farmer replied. "Though I could not see it, I knew it was there. My faith protected my fields, and that faith kept my heart at peace even in the storm." A silence settled over the disciples, each of them feeling the story's power resonating deeply within them. They felt awe for the farmer, and they wrestled with the weight of what it would mean to trust that deeply in what they couldn't see. Peter, who had always been quick to speak and act, looked down at his hands, rough and calloused from his days as a fisherman. "Master," he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability, "how can we know that the unseen hand is with us? We have left behind everything, our families, our homes, and each step feels like we are moving closer to danger. I want to trust, but sometimes it feels like we're walking into the storm alone." Jesus turned to Peter, his gaze filled with understanding and compassion. He knew Peter's heart well, his loyalty, his strength, and the unspoken fears he carried. Reaching out, Jesus placed a comforting hand on Peter's shoulder. "Peter, faith is not the absence of fear. It is the courage to walk forward, knowing that you are held even when you cannot see the one who holds you." Peter felt warmth spread through his chest, a sensation that chased away the shadows of doubt. His heart filled with a quiet strength he hadn't felt before, a feeling that he wasn't alone, even in his darkest moments. Thomas, known for his questioning nature, shifted uneasily, a mixture of curiosity and doubt flickering across his face. "Master, I want to believe in this unseen hand, but sometimes it feels impossible to trust what I cannot see. How can I hold on to faith when doubt shadows my every step?" Jesus looked at Thomas with a tender smile, understanding his inner struggle. He reached out and took Thomas's hand, guiding him to his feet. "Close your eyes, Thomas," Jesus said softly. "Take a step forward and trust that I am here." Thomas hesitated, feeling the rough ground beneath him. His heart raced, but with a deep breath, he closed his eyes and took a small, tentative step forward. Suddenly he stumbled, his foot catching on a rock, and he braced himself for a fall. But before he could lose his balance, Jesus' hand tightened around his, steadying him. Thomas opened his eyes, a mixture of relief and wonder filling his gaze. Jesus looked into his eyes, saying, "This is the unseen hand. It is there when you cannot see, holding you when you stumble, steadying you when you falter." Faith is not about sight. It is about knowing deep within that you are held. Tears filled Thomas's eyes as he nodded, finally understanding in a way he hadn't before. A profound peace settled over him, quieting his doubts. Jesus then addressed them all, his voice filled with both strength and tenderness. "Remember this, my friends. Faith is not about escaping the storm. Faith is the assurance that even in the storm you are not alone. The unseen hand guides, protects, and leads you even when you cannot see the path." As he spoke, each disciple felt the message settle deep within their hearts, lifting the burdens they carried. That night, as they left the olive grove, their hearts were lighter. Though they could not see the future, they knew that the unseen hand would be with them always. In that truth, they found the courage to carry on, knowing faith was their anchor, light, and greatest strength. This is end of the story. Comment Amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.